Face the future.
Everyone, Full Metal Jayce here, and today I'm going to be going over an updated runes and build guide for Jayce for patch 8.11. I have been having a lot of feedback, and I've been working on this build and guide build path a lot here lately, and I hope I can do the best to explain my reasoning behind what I feel is currently the most optimal for Jayce right now. We're going to be discussing top lane matchups and builds. We're going to be discussing top or mid lane matchups and builds, and why I feel what build you should go and what rune path you should go, and what scenario and why. We're first going to be talking about the mid lane page, which I personally run Electrocute in about 90% of my games, mid lane wise. I've always felt it's more of an instantaneous, all-in combo page at any given moment where you're able to abuse your opponent at any given moment and proc that damage. It's pretty straightforward. Again, Electrocute for the all-in combo, sudden impact to be able to make use of Jayce's engage. Eyeball collection for the scaling, as you can see, for between wards and takedowns. I've had this be stacked as early as 15 minutes, if not 10 minutes into the game. Same thing with Ravenous Hunter. You deal more damage as the game goes on, and you heal for the damage you deal. So it basically becomes a mini Death Stance passive, which is so insane to have at least 3+ stacks in it over the course of 10+ to 15 minutes into the game. Triumph stacking is pretty straightforward. I can't tell you how many times this ability has saved my ass in team fights or in long engages where I barely survive an ignite 1v1 because I end up killing my opponent and live with Triumph. Bloodline, again, is, I feel, just so necessary on Jayce because it gives you passive lifesteal scaling that allows you to not invest any gold towards a Doran's Blade or any amount of lifesteal in general. And I've had this rune scaled to max, which is 8%, as early as 6 minutes into the game, 8 minutes into the game, 10 minutes into the game. But generally, it's no more than 15 to 12 minutes into the game. You will have 8% minimum lifesteal. That scales indefinitely. That allows you to be able to, like I said, have that safety net of passive lifesteal that stacks with your Ravenous Hunter, and the sustainability that it gives you is pretty much next to none. Now we're going to go over the top lane page. Now the top lane page consists of running Aery against most matchups that you would not favor Electrocute, and what I mean by that is if you're against, say, like a Malphite or a Maokai or a Scion or some sort of sustainability champion like Gangplank or Vladimir or Mordekaiser in some cases, like, you do not want to run Electrocute just because of the pure fact that it's going to be a wasted amount of damage, because on a such long cooldown for early in-game or for early game harass, you want to have that instantaneous Aery combo that you can stack with Scorch to basically do more damage over the course of a harassed engage, as opposed to procking Electrocute, and then all of a sudden, say like a Vladimir Q heals more than the Electrocute damage, or a Gangplank Orange heals more than the damage, or anything that would make that Electrocute become wasted. Now, this is just my personal opinion. I feel Aery is always going to be better in top lane just because of the favored matchups that you can benefit from more. But again, you can also run Aery in mid lane, but I recommend running Electrocute because it's all about matchups. And in mid lane, you're able to abuse any given moment, engaging them and killing them, whereas Aery, it's more about dwindling them down, harassing them as much as possible, abusing the no cooldown harass, and then making a play off of it. Okay, so now that we've talked about the runes, I'm going to go into the build paths, and the build paths are also very straightforward. There are 4 build paths that I feel you're able to use with Jayce. And before I go into those build paths, I'm going to explain the core items that you must run with Jayce every single game, without question. Obviously, the most important item is the Ghost Blade. You have to build the Ghost Blade every single game. If you don't build a Ghost Blade when you're playing Jayce, you're doing something wrong. Okay, I'm just pointing that out there. It's too optimal of an item on Jayce to not build every game due to how it scales with him early. It gives you lethality. It has a proc that makes chasing and running away on engages insane because of the movement speed bonus you get from the gate as well. And then obviously Black Cleaver gives you a good CDR cap on top of Ghost Blade, and it helps with armor shredding, mobility for movement speed that scales with Ghost Blade. And then Last Whisper is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's now that the recent buffs to it gives you total percent armor pen instead of bonus armor pen, the amount of damage that you can do with this item early as a third, if not a second, sometimes fourth, depending. Generally, it's between second to fourth, but I personally recommend third iteming it because you always go, like I said, as we get into the builds, you always go Ghost Blade, Dust Blade, Black Cleaver, or you would go, in some cases, Ghost Blade, Storm Razor, Black Cleaver. Now, I've been experimenting with Storm Razor here lately, and what I have found is Storm Razor is actually a very efficient item on Jayce. I wouldn't necessarily build it as a second item in some cases, but it can work because, again, you can replace your Duskblade with Storm Razor in a typical build and allow yourself to have basically more reliable damage because you don't have to worry about the Duskblade proccing. But at the same time, you lose the benefit of having the awareness of knowing where your enemy's vision is. So it's mixed feelings. Like I said, there are other builds you can do. But the mid lane standard build that I have been running pretty much almost every game that I don't involve a Storm Razor is where you obviously get a Ghost Blade for the early game. You get a Dusk Blade for the mid game scaling. If you can have a Dusk Blade before the 20 to 22 minute mark, which in most games is very easily doable. And then you build a Black Cleaver for the mid game scaling, where generally around the 25-minute mark you want to have this item completed as a third item to be able to scale into the game going forward. And then your fourth and fifth items are generally going to be either a mixture of a Storm Razor if you haven't gotten it yet, a Last Whisper if you feel like you need to against their tankiness, or a Death Stance if you didn't get a Dust Blade, but in this case we did get a Dust Blade, so Death Stance wouldn't be a part of this build because you don't need the CDR. Whereas in the mid lane Storm Razor build, because you replaced Duskblade with a Storm Razor, you're able to incorporate Death Stance for the extra CDR to make up for this build. Next to that, again, the builds are very, very straightforward. They're slightly tweaked in the sense of obviously what you got to be going against in any given moment in a game. Against a more tanky team, you always prioritize your Ghost Blade, but against, say, if you're top lane against, say, like a Scion, you would obviously want to prioritize a Black Cleaver over a Storm Razor or a Dusk Blade, or maybe even a Last Whisper. And then, but again, you get a Last Whisper as a third item to solidify that core against a tanky team that you're, struggling dealing damage on, where, once you get these three items on Jayce, you are unstoppable. You will not be able to be 1v1'd if you play it properly, and between these three items, you can single-handedly shred anyone without contest. Next to that, like I said, the next build basically consists of going, you go Ghost Blade first item, you get Black Cleaver second, but if you're against an enemy team that you feel like you don't need to worry about building a Last Whisper, obviously, you can opt for a Storm Razor or a Dust Blade, in many scenarios, and be able to still be relevant because you already got your two of your core items for the movement speed, the armor shred, and then getting a Storm Razor gives you more damage on squishies or more burst potential or just better dueling potential because the crit damage scales with your lifesteal, keep in mind. That's another big perk of the item. And then obviously after you get your third item, Storm Razor, you would finish off the build with a Lord Dominic's or even a Mortal Remainder in certain scenarios where you have to get a Mortal Remainder over Lord Dominic's because they might have like a Mundo or a Janna or some sort of insanely sustainable champion pool like Vlad, etc., etc., etc. And then we're going to get into the situational items now. So the situational items consist of everything from a a Guardian Angel to a QSS to Sunfire to Frozen Mallet, Phantom Dancer, Blathering King, and then we're going to discuss the type of boots upgrade as well. The reason why I have Guardian Angel now as a situational item over being a part of a core build is because I feel with the new change to Guardian Angel, I feel like it's not a necessary item now because what I've ultimately learned is when you stick to your core build, you know, getting a Ghost Blade Black Cleaver or a Storm Razor or a Last Whisper upgrade, a part of that build, when you look at the new changes to Storm Razor and you see how the item builds out of a BF sword and a pickaxe to then be able to upgrade into a Storm Razor, well, when you look at the same sense as where if you get a BF sword and you were going to get a GA, but because of the way they changed the GA now, where it involves you having a chain vest instead of just a cloth armor, so when you take the look at, you know, getting a BF sword and then you pick up a pickaxe, you're already that much closer to getting a Last Whisper upgrade. Or not a Last Whisper upgrade, but a Storm Razor upgrade. So you can basically buy the BF sword like you would any other GA, and then instead of getting the GA, you would get a pickaxe to be able to get that much closer to a Storm Razor to be able to opt for the Storm Razor as opposed to investing your gold for a GA. Now, I mean, it's situational because that's why it's a situational item. So, you know, you might go against a team that's heavy AD and you might want to be that, you know, protected carry so you don't die. And that's the exact same scenario where Sunfire falls into, where if you're against a full AD team or at least a majority AD team and you want to get like a 4th or a 5th item and you don't want to build a GA but you want to be a little more tanky and be relevant in team fights and, you know, sustain, or not sustain, but tank a little bit better, you can opt for a Sunfire because it's only 100 gold difference between the GA and a little bit cheaper than the Storm Razor if you've already got a Last Whisper. Again, QSS is another optional item. It works in the same sense of if you don't want to have to worry about building too much magic resist, you can get a Mercurial Scimitar as like a 4th to 5th item for the extra, you know, CC disinterruption. Maw I have down here on optional as well because I feel like if you're able to properly position and even with Mercury Treads alone, I feel like that's enough magic resist to generally survive majority of matchups and not worry about dying. Same boat as Frozen Mallet. You know, it's another defensive item that's also a little bit aggressive because it gives you attack speed slow and it's around the same price range as a Storm Razor or a GA or a Sunfire or even a, you know, a Phantom Dancer can be. But again, that's why these are situational items. Phantom Dancer is an item where you get, after you get your core build, like you get your Ghost Blade, Black Cleaver, or Last Whisper, you get a Phantom Dancer as a 4th item, just to be able to trade more efficiently, push faster, and have that, you know, bonus movement speed that scales with Black Cleaver and Ghost Blade to make you basically, you know, no one can outrun you and no one can chase you because of how effective you are with your movement speed, on top of if you run Celerity in top lane with the Aery page, you know. So there are perks to running these items. They're very situational, so they have to rely heavily on how you've already progressed into the game according to your build that you feel is the most appropriate against certain matchups. But other than that, I really hope this guide was helpful. I will do my best to answer any questions anyone may have about anything related to this guide. Thank you again for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for future videos. Leave a like if you enjoyed this. Be sure to comment any questions or concerns you have, and I will see you guys next time. I'm out of here. Full Metal Jayce out.